Hey everybody, Mr. Scott here, and you're here because you want to learn about incentives and motivation, how they impact human behavior, and how we can apply them to economics. I'm glad you're here. Let's get into that right now. As we get started, it's important to keep in mind that every decision we make is guided by incentives, which are the reasons that push or pull at our behavior. They explain why people respond to things like prices, rewards, and consequences, thus shaping everything from what we buy to how hard we work. In economics, to understand people, we have to follow what motivates them. In this class, in these sessions, always remember this is not personalized financial advice. Make sure you're following all local laws. It's not legal advice. If you're a kid, make sure you talk to your parents before making any big decisions. Our objectives today: understand how incentives influence human behavior in everyday life and markets. Identify different types of incentives, financial, social, and moral, and explain how they change individuals' decision making. Next, we want to analyze how people make rational choices and trade-offs. And then finally, we want to recognize that while economists model people as irrational, real decisions are often pretty complicated. And we'll get into that as we go forward. We need to dive into this by looking at what an incentive actually is. So an incentive is something that motivates somebody toward a specific behavior. Incentives are all around us, from family and friends to work in our professions. Even our entertainment incentivizes us. And this is the case because incentives are extremely powerful in motivating desired behavior. Consider even some of the video games that you might have heard of. There's different rewards in them to motivate you as you play. Work motivates people with different salaries, or our family and friends might motivate us through their judgment or lack of approval. And those are all very powerful motivating factors impacting human behavior. There are different types of incentives. Financial incentives involve money, prices, wages, and taxes, things that manipulate our behavior through the all-powerful dollar, or if you don't live in the US, whatever your local currency is. Social approval, reputation, belonging, these are all extremely powerful incentives. Even starting as young as elementary school, young kids can be impacted by these different type of social relational incentives. And then moral incentives, appealing to things like fairness or sense of right or wrong or your duty. These can also really powerfully motivate your behavior. And keep in mind, you as an individual, you might respond differently to different types of incentives. Not every person is going to be motivated by financial, social, and moral equally to the maximum levels possible. Everyone's different, and that's what makes economics so interesting. Examples of incentives at play in the real world include things like a store lowering prices, motivating more customers to buy something. Maybe a school offers extra credit where more students finish work. I know that when I taught economics for 15 years, I taught AP economics, and I rarely gave extra credit because we were so focused on getting things right, making sure we took care of business, mastering skills and performance. But on the occasions I did offer extra credit, wow, was I able to get students to go way above and beyond because they were extremely motivated individuals. And that was a really powerful thing for them. Another thing to consider is things like restaurants banning smoking, where there's limiting access to that product, or like even social shaming. This could lead to fewer people smoking. These are all different types of incentives, and they're kind of an invisible hand guiding our behavior throughout our actions. Now, I want to provide some context because economics isn't just about judgment. Economists don't really judge human behavior, but they do evaluate why and how things happen. Economists like to study cause and effect, why people make decisions, and then what's going to happen next. Economists like to make educated guesses so they can make predictions. Many people, especially in politics or ethics, use economic ideas to evaluate or judge the outcomes in economic spheres. But that's actually outside of economic theory. Economists are not here to try to place moral judgment on people's decisions. Adam Smith, the founder of modern economics, he was actually a moral philosopher who was asking, why do people act the way that they do? And he was really interested in this idea. One of the key insights he developed was that if we understand incentives and behavior, we can actually predict results and not necessarily have to assign moral worth to people's decisions. So economics explains actions, and then the sphere of morality can evaluate whether they are good or bad. But that's outside the scope of this session. Economists like to create tools and ideas to help evaluate different concepts, and one of them is Homo economicus, the idea of economic man or economic human. It assumes that people are rational, weighing the costs and benefits to maximize their satisfaction with every decision they make. And we all know as human beings that People don't really do that. That's something that we like to assume in economics to try to make our jobs easier. But human beings are complicated and they're impacted by all sorts of things, our emotions, our social relationships, and economic human beings, the rational actor who maximizes satisfaction, is a concept that helps make understanding behavior a little bit easier, but it's only theory. This model helps build clear, testable theories about how markets and people behave, but we always have to remember a theory is just a theory and the real world is complicated. In assuming that all human beings are rational utility maximizers, we tend to look at trade-offs as being one of the things human beings have to figure out when being incentivized to do one thing or another. Keep in mind, a trade-off is the varied options we have when making a choice. And because every choice has benefits and costs, we as people must evaluate these options. Rational choices mean selecting the option that seems most worthwhile in the moment. Even when people make mistakes, there's usually a reason behind that choice. Let me give you an example. One time when I was teaching high school, I wanted to see if I could change somebody's motivation in the moment. So I took out a large bag of M&Ms, like the 500 pack. And I told the class, I said, I have a challenge for you. I'm willing to give this bag of M&Ms to any student in class on the one condition that you eat as many M&Ms as possible. Well, immediately there was this awesome football player. He's a really good kid. He raised his hand, huge guy, and he's like, I'm in. So I gave him the bag of M&Ms and he slammed 286 M&Ms. And he's like, I can't eat anymore. Nope, it's not going to happen. And then I took out a $5 bill. And this is actually a while ago. So this is when $5 was worth something. And I said, I will give you $5 to eat 100 more M&Ms. And the class was like, no way. Oh my gosh. And he thought about it for like 2 or 3 seconds. And he said, all right, sounds good. So I slapped the $5 on the table. He counted out 100 M&Ms, slammed them home in about 30 seconds. And then I gave him the cash. But what I did was I manipulated his motivation by providing an incentive in the moment to change his behavior. And for better or worse, it worked, and he ate all the M&Ms and he didn't feel very good the rest of the day. But in that moment, the cost was worth it because the benefit had increased beyond the satisfaction of chocolate to throw a little cash into the mix. Now, more broadly outside the classroom, incentives in the marketplace are all over the place. Lower prices can attract buyers. Higher wages motivate workers. Taxes or regulation discourage certain behaviors. And thus, every price, every reward, or government policy, it's sending a signal to people that's going to shape decisions. So keep an eye out for things in the media, on your streaming content, of when something changes that might motivate behavior, there's usually an intended goal behind it. And as an economic thinker, it's your job to figure out what exactly is the motivation. Now, not all incentives produce the things that they're trying to create. So for example, a bonus at work, when somebody's at their job, it might cause rushed work that, the end product's not very good. A free service might get overused by people that don't really need it. And economists study both intended and unintended outcomes of incentives, because when we see what happens as we manipulate behavior as a society, we can make better decisions collectively. Every choice has layers to it: scarcity, cost, and individual motivation. And typically, if you understand the incentives, you have a much greater chance of understanding why people are doing what they're doing. In summary, incentives are going to drive every choice we make: financial, social, or moral. Economics seeks to explain how people respond to different costs and benefits, usually adjusted through incentives, through rational choice. Real life is going to add emotion, different habits, and culture to the mix because we know it's complicated, and thus understanding incentives helps us predict human behavior and make smarter decisions about different policies or actions in our lives. I'm Mr. Scott. Thanks for being here. Stick around. I'll see you next time.